everybody to today's webinar. If you're ready to gain a superpower of your leadership with adaptability, you're at the right place. We're so excited to introduce our speaker, Elijah. And for some of you, you've already got introduced to him at Market Tech. So we're really excited to have him on today's webinar. Before then, there's just a couple of housekeeping things that we want to go over. Please utilize the chat in today's webinar. So do you typically thrive in change? Do you tolerate it? Do you resist it? Drop it in that chat. That chat is usually found in the bottom right side of your screen. That is where you can ask your questions. You can leave your comments. We will be monitoring it. There's going to be strategic places for you to really ask questions. It's going to be a good webinar. So make sure you engage in that chat with us. And then these webinars are free and open to the public, and they are free because of our great and wonderful sponsors. And so today we want to feature and take a moment to talk about Data Nicely. So Data Nicely helps small businesses and organizations make smarter decisions by turning complex data into clear, actionable insights. For simplifying reporting to improving marketing performance, their tools and expertise empower you to truly understand what's working and what's not. If you're looking to save time, reduce guesswork, and grow with confidence, Data Nicely is a partner definitely worth exploring. So be sure to learn more at datanicely.com. We'd also like to take a moment to highlight a featured Grow Nebraska member, Dreamers Place, a valued member since 2023. Dreamers Place is a nonprofit branch dedicated to serving veterans, individuals with special needs, and even the broader community through therapeutic hands-on experiences. Through their compassionate care, they do help rebuild trust, confidence, and a sense of peace, transforming lives one session, one step, and one heart at a time. So we're proud to have them in the Grow Nebraska community. And be sure to learn more or even support their mission. Visit dreamersplaceranch.org. We do have an entity called the Women's Business Center that is in Omaha. And so if you're ever in the area or you're ever interested in visiting during their bail session, banker, accountant, insurance, and legal, we'd encourage you to stop by. Grow Nebraska wouldn't be what it is without our members. And so if you're interested in Grow Nebraska or you're ever wondering, could Grow Nebraska help my business or a business you have in mind, reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation. We help with marketing, gaining a digital footprint, networking, and we do tailored coaching with our members. We really meet them where they're at. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen. I am going to let Elijah take the stage and give us our superpower of leadership adaptability.
Awesome. Thank you, Cami. Thanks, Chanel, and Grow Nebraska. This is a huge opportunity that I'm been looking forward to. So let's dive in here. All right. So like she said, my name is Elijah Landell. I'm the owner and coach at Rising Tide Leadership Development. My wife and I coach together. She joined me in the business about 1.5 years ago. And today we're talking about a leader superpower, adaptability quotient. So if you were able to join us on at Market Tech, you kind of got a preview of this. We're going to dive a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of it. And there's quite a bit to cover, so I'm going to move kind of fast. I would suggest maybe taking some notes because there are some spots for Q&A. So Cami and I will utilize the chat for that. But first of all, what is adaptability? Well, here's a couple of definitions that we like to utilize. Adaptability is the capacity to adjust one's thoughts and behaviors in order to effectively respond to uncertainty, new information, and changed circumstances. In addition to that, as a disposition and skill, adaptability is essential to an individual's psychological health, social success, and academic and workplace achievement. So why has this become such a hot topic, if you will? And why have we taken the effort to break it down and measure it? Well, in the past, the amount of change and technology and the speed at which those things came at us was below our ability as humans to be able to utilize them and adapt to them. So that gap we had where technology and the changes or below us. That was very efficient time for us. But as we all know, technology's on a boom. Our access to information is on a boom. Our ability to gather data continues to grow at alarming rate. And so it's surpassed our ability as humans to adapt. And so this gap between our ability to adapt and the information and the changes that are coming at us is something that becomes very volatile. It leaves us in uncertainty. It can be very complex or ambiguous. And so this is where we live now, in this gap of, we have a certain level of ability to adapt, and this VUCA world that we call it continues to move forward at a faster and faster pace. So the idea of measuring and coaching people through adaptability is trying to close that gap as much as we can. Why does this affect us, or how does it affect us in the workplace? Well, 40% of jobs that exist today won't exist in the next 10 years. Over 1 billion jobs are liable to be radically transformed by technology and automation, which could free employees to spend as much as 30% of their time on new work. That doesn't mean that they'll get their work done in just 70% of the time. It means that they'll be able to do other things with that 30%. 80% of leaders today say they are experiencing skills gaps or expect to see them within the next 5 years. And a lot of this data actually comes from 2020. So imagine what we're seeing today when this was 5 years ago. And then 12 billion productive workdays are lost every year globally to depression and anxiety alone, at a cost of nearly $1 trillion. What does that mean? Why is that thrown in there? Because when we feel overwhelmed by the amount of change that's happening, it affects us emotionally, it affects us psychologically, and eventually affects us physically. And that's where we're seeing this depression, anxiety spiking higher than ever. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means we need to develop our skills to adapt and navigate, and we need to build and maintain a more positive relationship with change. So with that being said, and now this new AQai, or adaptability quotient, coming out, we're definitely making the claim that adaptability is the new competitive advantage. With that being said, individuals who show a higher ability to adapt have better mental health than those who are unable to cope with the changes that happen in life. There's a strong relationship between a person's ability to adapt and how well they're doing in life. For example, in follow-up interviews with MBA students up to 19 years after they graduated, a strength in adaptability predicted not only their life satisfaction, but career satisfaction and their career success. Of all the things that they looked at, the ability to adapt was the strongest predictor of all emotional and social intelligence competencies. So in a world that's ever changing at an ever increasing speed, it's no surprise that data is showing that the ability to adapt is, one, an asset in leadership, and two, is also at the heart of innovation. And the question then is, what is adaptability quotient? Well, in the past, if you were doing something and somebody told you to, be more adaptable or get with the program, basically they were telling you to do something different in very vague terms, but they weren't really explaining what that meant. So AQ defines the language, framework, and the measurement of adaptability to develop highly adaptable individuals, teams, organizations, and even communities so that we can thrive during the fastest period time of change in human history. And Peter Drucker told us, Peter Drucker is one of the kind of founding fathers of management training. He said, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So what I'd like to do really quick is share a very short video from Ross Thornley. Him and a guy named Mike Raven are the founders of this adaptability, or the AQai, and they've come up with this adaptability quotient. And I'm going to let him kind of explain in his terms the model, if you will.
In order to improve anything, you have to measure it. So when we started to look at adaptability as a key component that everybody's saying, this is the thing, this is what we need to unlock and understand to thrive in the future.
I have a different methodology to assess startup founders, and it's not complicated. I look for signs of one specific trait. Not IQ, not EQ, It's adaptability. How well a person reacts to the inevitability of change, and lots of it. Adaptability itself is a form of intelligence, and our adaptability quotient, or AQ, is something that can be measured, tested, and improved.
The whole concept of AQ, of adaptability quotient, we broke it down into 3 areas: ability, character, and environment. So AQ ability is how and to what degree do I adapt?
It's a choice. Many people don't realize it's a choice, but I think it's a choice about how not only you want to react to certain situations, but what kind of people you want to surround yourself with.
AQ character, it's who adapts and why.
Some people will adapt because they're motivated by big goals, by growth, by achievement. While the others will adapt because I have to adapt. It's a duty. I must, otherwise I will lose my job. And you are actually not bad because you adapt perhaps in a very systematic way. It's just your character. But your manager must know about that.
AQ environment is about when does somebody adapt and to what degree.
People spend 2/3 of their time in the office working. If they have a frustrating experience, a depressing experience, an experience that sucks when they have to go to work, then probably their life will be impacted in the same way.
We're at the ground, 0.1 of assessment and measure, and we do it through a conversational chatbot. So you'll have a 25-minute, half an hour conversation. We're working to get that as natural as possible, and you will then get a score, so an AQ score, and you also get a bit of a profile. But taking that data only shows you that snapshot. What we're super excited about is, can we predict what might happen next? A reskill index or a change readiness of that team or cohort or workforce, so that we can then put interventions in place for those that might struggle, aren't quite ready, so that we're using our resources effectively.
I think adaptability is one of those essential skills for the future. You gotta have great IQ, you gotta have EQ, but if you don't have your AQ now for the future, you're not gonna stand out. You set your mindset towards it as you learn and build that muscle. It's something that everyone needs to focus on through life.
All right, so as he mentioned, there's 3 aspects to how we look at adaptability, and we're going to talk about how each one of those is important. It's not just personality, but it's also the environment that we're talking about. It's also the skills that we have to be able to deal with change. And so adaptability quotient, or the AQ, is a holistic measure of individual and workplace adaptability. And as he mentioned before, it's kind of the third part to the intelligence quotient, or IQ, and the emotional intelligence, the EQ, and it wraps the whole thing together. So we're going to talk about the AQ ability, how and to what degree I or a person adapts. We're going to talk about AQ character, who adapts and why, and we're talking about the environment. Now, all 3 of these areas have 5 subdimensions. I want to go through these really quickly. As we go through each area, please take some notes or jot down any questions you have, because at the end of each one, we're kind of throw out an opportunity to ask questions. And so here we're talking about what we call the ACE model of adaptability, or the AQ model. And overall, here are the 3 areas, and there are 15 subdimensions that make up your score when you take this assessment. And we're going to talk about how each one of these pieces together. So let's start with AQ ability, answering the question, how and to what degree do I or does an individual adapt? Now, these are the most readily improvable skills that we have when it comes to adaptability. And so you'll see as we talk through them how they can be improved. The first one we're going to talk about is grit. I think grit, resilience, stick-to-itiveness have all kind of been thrown together as far as synonyms. In our case, grit is really the ability to stay the course. It's seeing things through to the end. So we go from ideation, figuring out what things we can improve upon, what things we can add to what we're already doing. We activate the things, the resources that we need to the areas that they're needed, and then we push them through the implementation of these plans and these ideas until it is accomplished. On these 5 particular subdimensions, it's on a scale of 1 to 100, and then based off of scores, you fall into a low, medium, or high level of grit. The first one, low grit, says something to the effect of, I want to do something else. I quit. And people during change that demonstrate low grit are usually unable to stick to long term. They switch tasks pretty often, and they're easily discouraged. However, if someone measures in the medium grit area, they're thinking, well, I'll keep going, but I need some help. So they look for multiple ways to achieve a task. They benefit from support to finish what they've started, but they can also put off or delay tasks or even avoid tasks altogether. And then someone with high grit, someone who's really known for finishing what they started, they're not easily discouraged. They often stick to the plan, and they're confident in the ability to achieve their long-term goals. So that's grit. It's the overall pushing things through to completion. The next subdimension for ability is mental flexibility. Now, mental flexibility is super important because it's the ability to observe a current situation, accept it, appreciate it, and embrace any competing demands we might have. And a person with high mental flexibility is able to see tensions or trade-offs of like different departments or different locations in business or in life as opportunities to be innovative, right? So someone with low mental flexibility might just say, I haven't got time to find anywhere, right? They feel up against it a lot. They're less open to new ideas. Medium mental flexibility, the ability to balance these things, is they can deal with competing demands, right? They don't necessarily thrive through it, but they can deal with it. They're more open to new perspectives, and they can adjust and change approaches in response to the environment that they're in, where these competing demands are coming from. And then finally, someone who has high mental flexibility says, I have a new idea. No, wait, I have another new idea. They're constantly coming up with new ways, new paths to get to the goal that they set from the beginning, right? They enjoy working on multiple objectives and pushing them forward simultaneously versus one at a time. And they meet new challenges in creative ways. So mental flexibility is very important, and being able to balance things. And again, with all the changes that happen to us and how fast change comes at us, especially in the technology world, mental flexibility is one of the keys to this particular superpower that we're talking about. The third one would be mindset. When it comes to mindset, it really comes down to the idea of, do you have a fixed mindset or do you have a growth mindset? Carol Dweck actually has a book called Mindset, and she talks about these two things. And the difference is, someone who has a fixed mindset tends to believe that human attributes, or the things that we're capable of, they're set. So whatever I'm given, that's what I have, and I can capitalize on it, but I can't necessarily add to it. Versus a growth mindset believes that human attributes, our abilities, our skills can be changed and grown, and we can add new ones to them through hard work and effort. So if I have more of a low adaptability mindset, I tend to believe change is not always a good thing, right? So if things change, I tend to think negatively that this is going to have a bad outlook, and sometimes we'll just accept that it's going to be a bad outcome. A medium mindset would be kind of in the middle of, sometimes things work out for the good, sometimes things don't work out for the best. Tend to think, I'm unsure of this, but let's proceed carefully, right? They expect to adjust to change when they're required to. Sometimes they find it hard to believe in themselves during tough circumstances, and they find themselves often, quote unquote, dealing with new situations. And then a person with high mindset would be more on that growth side of things. Change always tends to lead to growth and abundance. So they are the ones that are very optimistic when they think of the future, and that these changes or these pivots that we have to make are going to be helpful, right? They adapt quickly, and they have high levels of self-belief. So those are the first three of AQ ability. The fourth one, when we talk about resilience, if AQ ability and grit are the idea of seeing things through to the end, resilience is the ability to deal with setbacks or obstacles and recover not only quickly from them, but bounce back to where we were, or even bounce forward because of that particular setback or obstacle. Again, low resilience might say challenges set me back and I try to avoid them. So this can lead to higher workplace stress, and they do tend to avoid any type of obstacle. They just try to stay the course on what they know. Medium resilience might say, give me time and I'll be okay. They're more comfortable in coping and absorbing, and they tend to be more anxious if setback requires transformative change, meaning they have to grow themselves to get through this particular setback. And then high resilience people basically look at life and say, setbacks, what setbacks? I've moved on already. They recover very quickly, have high capacity to rapidly bounce back, and they're typically more open to radical transformation, and they tend to experience less workplace stress and lower sets of burnout. So the higher the resilience, the lower the burnout. The lower the resilience someone has, the more they are affected by setbacks and obstacles, the higher the work stress they tend to feel. And finally, the last skill or AQ ability we're going to talk about is the ability to unlearn. It's been said that the illiterate of the future are not those who can't read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So the idea of unlearning is getting rid of old thoughts, rethinking the status quo, getting rid of old methodologies and learning new ways that are more productive, more efficient. I'm guessing most of you, once you started your career, you learned something, you learned a skill or a way to do something. And then as you went along, somebody else taught you something, you learned a new software, a new way of doing something that made it easier for you to do the same amount of work in less amount of time. And so that's the idea of unlearning, right? So if I can learn things, go through those and balance them out and unlearn them to relearn a better way to do it, that's the whole idea of unlearning, right? So high unlearning person is going to say, we must change things, the way we do things, and do it right now because we see the benefit of it. Someone with medium unlearning skill is going to say, let's discuss what might work now. They're a little more objective about it. They're a little more hesitant about it. But those who don't want to unlearn, they want to stick with what is known, and they don't recognize all the time that what worked in the past won't necessarily work for the future. So as we're talking about all of these, here's a quick recap. We talked about AQ ability, which includes grit, the commitment to a goal, mental flexibility, weighing opposing demands and seeing the obstacles as stepping stones, mindset, are you fixed or a growth mindset, resilience, the ability to overcome setbacks and obstacles, and then the ability to unlearn or let go of the old to come up with a new. So here's an opportunity for some questions. What 1 to 3 things do you believe to be true about your AQ ability with the understanding of those 5 subdimensions? And what AQ ability subdimension would you like to know more about? Do we have any questions in there, Cami?
Not yet. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in that chat.
So we're going to keep moving. If it's something from the first section, that's fine. We can still answer in the future. Okay. So that was AQ ability, right? Any one of those things we can improve upon. We can become more adaptable. And like I said, the abilities are the skills that we can work on. And like any skill, we can improve upon them. The next part we're going to talk about is AQ character. Who adapts and why? AQ character is different than the other 2 dimensions in that it's more on a continuum than it is on a scale. It's kind of an either or kind of right in the middle, as opposed to a high and a low score. And these are more innate personality traits that come out in response to situations of change. And that's what we're going to look at really quick. So for instance, emotional range. When you're facing times of change or situations of change, do you tend to be more collected? Do you tend to be more reactive, or do you find yourself kind of balanced? So someone who's more reactive tends to lean into emotions driving their actions and their decisions. Someone who's more collected tends to kind of take a step back and assess the situation and then figure out what's the best path forward. And someone who's balanced is able to kind of read the situation. And when it comes to our history and our growing up and the experiences we've had as individuals, most of us probably have this idea that one of these things is better than the other. And that might be true in most cases, but really it's kind of getting to that balanced area of, as an individual and my personality coming through in this time of change, what's the best response in this situation. So for instance, let's say you're a company and you're rolling out a new product. So you've done the research, you've put it together, you've done the testing, and now you put together a marketing campaign. And as soon as you roll out the marketing campaign for this brand new product, something changes in the industry and we're just not getting a good response. Probably a good idea to be more balanced or collected and be like, take a step back and say, what changed? Why is it not, reaching based off the research that we've done? How can we change things? And then we make a plan and move forward. It might be different if I get to the factory or to the place at work and there's smoke billowing out a window, and I open the door and there's fire flooding out. It might be a little bit better to be more reactive and get things done and get the phone call in to get the fire department there versus being like, oh, well, why did the fire start? Who should I call? What things should going through it at that time is not ideal. You know what I mean? So collected versus reactive, or where do you fall in that spectrum? The next part that we look at as far as being able and ready to adapt is extroversion. As someone who's a little bit more, I would say more of an ambivert, it really is, what kind of social stimulation do you look for during times of change? Do you look for more of an extroverted approach where it's like, I want to be around other people, I want to talk through it, hear other people's ideas of what's going on and how this change is coming about? Do you tend to kind of sink into yourself, be more self-introspective, and maybe just want to have one-on-one conversations with someone you really, really trust? And that's more of the introverted side of things. Or are you an ambivert where it's kind of like, you know what, I don't mind being with big groups of people or the entire team during this change, but I definitely need my time alone to self-reflect and go through that as well. That's the second area that we look at when it comes to character as far as who adapts and why do they adapt. Next, we have hope. I love talking about hope because I think it's a different perspective than what a lot of people have. I actually had to change my perspective on hope. Hope is not the same thing as like just wishing that things are going to get better. It's not the idea of just being optimistic and saying, oh, well, I think that things are going to work out for the best. Jonathan Sachs said, optimism is the belief that things will get better, and hope is a faith that together we can make things better. Optimism is a passive virtue where hope is an active one. So to use that analogy, right? Passive versus active. If I look at the glass, right? A pessimist says the glass is half full. An optimist says, or half empty. An optimist says the glass is half full. Someone that has hope adds action to that, which should lead to a more positive outcome. And they say, I can go refill that cup and we have more cup, right? So when it comes to hope on this scale, it's, are we hopeful that my actions are going to help get to a better outcome? Am I uncertain of whether what we do is going to make a difference, or am I doubtful that no matter what happens, it's probably going to be a negative outcome, right? People who are doubtful kind of accept disappointing outcomes, or people who are hopeful are always looking for what actions can I take that will make this a better situation. And then the last two I like to talk about as well. So when you're in times of change or situations of change, we look at motivation style. And motivation style is the balance between risks versus rewards. And this can be obviously different from situation to situation. It could be different from in a different time of life. But it's really, do we play to win or do we play to protect? So if I'm playing to protect, I'm going to avoid risks and protect the things that I already have. If it's more in the middle, it's more contextual. It's more of a balance of like, we'll take calculated risks. And if I play to win, I'm going to look at the risks, but I'm also going to say, if this reward is so much bigger than the risk that we're taking, I'm going to step into that. So the situation I like to look at as far as like life changes and how it can affect playing to win versus playing to protect. Like I think back to when I first got out of high school and went to college, and then after college, I did some travel. I moved around. I went to different states and followed opportunities because one, I wasn't dating anybody. I was single. I didn't have really any ties to anything or any place at that particular time. And the things that I was giving up as far as like being close to family stuff, I still had connection to them via like phone calls and things like that. But the reward of growing into my career was huge. But fast forward, I moved home from Colorado in 2019. I started working with my brother. 2020 hit, I started the business, and through that, met my wife. We now have 4 kids. The things that I could risk was much bigger. So I might play to protect now. I don't know that I would make the same decision I did when I was fresh out of college to move across the country, because our family's here, cousins are here. Our kids get to see grandparents and aunts and uncles and things like that. So that might affect my decision. And that's the idea of playing to protect versus playing to win, even in the business or personal context. And then the other side, remember, these are more innate skill or the innate traits that come out in times of change. Then we have thinking style. So if motivation styles, do I play to protect what I have or play to win and move forward? Thinking style has more to do with big picture versus details. In a time of change, am I more of a big picture? I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. We're all moving in the right direction. Am I more of a connector where I balance the two and I let certain people think big picture, certain people think details? Or do I tend to fall into the details? So when we're going through change, I really zero in on the details so nothing gets missed. Again, neither one is right or wrong. It's more based on how your experiences in life come out in your personality in light of change. But it's also a balance of what is most necessary in that particular change or situation. So quick recap, we've got emotional range. You tend to be more reactive or collected. Extroversion, do you seek out others during times of change and you're more extroverted, or are you more introverted and seek solitude? Are you more hopeful, doubtful, or uncertain during times of change? And then do you play to protect to win, or play to protect or play to win by your motivation style? And then finally, do you focus on the details or the big picture during times of change? So with that, we'll come to our second kind of break. Again, write down 1 to 3 things about your AQ character that kind of stand out to you that would be a strength to a team. And what of the AQ character subdimensions would you like to know more about?
Well, while they're writing those down, we've had some interaction. We've definitely had some people say they're more ambivert, people that are more, play to protect. So, Elijah, Daniel asked, what mindset shifts are necessary for someone struggling to adapt to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things is like that play to protect or play to win, right? Like if I'm playing to protect all the time, I'm facing situations out of fear, right? And one of the things that we talk about at Rising Tide is the ability to be courageous. So you're going to still feel the fear, the uncertainty, but are you willing to move forward out of your comfort zone to be able to adapt the way you need to? Because again, in today's world, courage is one of the biggest things, and if you can't be adaptable without being courageous. So one of the biggest mind shifts is sometimes you do have to take a risk and just take that first step as far as mindset goes, to say, you know what, I have these skills, but I can grow them, or I have these skills and I need to learn this skill. So there's quite a few things that go into that particular aspect of it.
Well, that's a good segue to our next question. This next person asked, do you see very many people move from play to protect into play to win? And how do you potentially get someone closer to at least contextual if you can't get them all the way to play to win?
Yeah, to be honest, it's more of a natural movement from play to win to play to protect, because like I said, as we grow older, as we get into our careers, right, we gain more things, whatever that is, status, home, family. So it's a lot easier to go from play to win to play to protect, simply because in the beginning, when we're younger, we don't have a lot to give up or to trade off to go win, right? But the more things we get, the harder it is to say, well, I'm going to risk all this stuff because the thing on the other side is bigger, better, moves us forward, helps me grow, whatever that is. How can we be more contextual? By keeping whatever that thing is that you're trying to protect in mind. So is it the business? Is it your people? Is it your family, right? If we can go from, I'm just going to protect what I have, to if we get a little more contextual and maybe take a few more risks, we can actually protect and provide for these, the business, help it grow, help our people grow, bring more people into the business, and think more abundantly. That's when we can see the shift. So I don't see the shift a lot. I think there's kind of a movement out there where more and more people are starting to do that.
Yeah, I am like nodding my head in total agreement. So thank you for answering that. If there's any follow-up questions, Daniel or Dustin, let us know.
Awesome. Any more right now?
Nope, that's all. So keep dropping questions and comments into the chat, everyone.
Awesome. Okay, so we've talked about AQ ability, we've talked about AQ character. Now let's talk about AQ environment. So this is one of the key things that I think sets apart this particular assessment, because it looks at how the environment, the culture, the business itself, or the organization itself affects people and their ability to adapt. If I just looked at personality, that would be kind of stifling, I think, or maybe put people into a box, where this actually looks at the external factors that come into that. So when does someone adapt and to what degree? And the thing I like about this is, as leaders, as owners of businesses, we have lots of influence on this particular aspect of things. Do we create an environment where people are willing and able to grow and adapt and move forward? Or are we stifling that and saying, this is how we've always done it, we need to keep that? Now, as employees, there's less influence on this capability. It's more of a response to these things. So let's talk about it. The first thing would be company support. Company support simply is the general perception of the employees on how the organization as a whole views them. Do they view them as individuals with needs, families, things outside of business? Or do they view them as a part of a machine that is only here to produce, right? So if I have low company support, I'm going to feel more like I'm just a number. Maybe I don't belong here. If I have medium company support, I might feel like I don't feel a real connection or spark, but like I might have a few close people that I can talk to. Or if I have high company support, I know that my company cares about me and has my back. Now, one thing I will say, and some companies do this really, really well, and some companies don't. Smaller companies tend to have a little bit more of that quote unquote family feel, so that they might have a little bit higher company support than large companies that have, multiple locations or chains or things like that. I'm going to share, as we get into a couple of other these, I'm going to share kind of an experience I had from a large company. Next, we have emotional health. And really, emotional health comes down to, are your people thriving at work? Do they experience more positive moments and limit negative ones? Or are they experiencing more negative moments when they're at work? So if I'm at low emotional health, I'm probably going to be experiencing either a balance of or more negative moments than I do positive ones. If I'm more of the medium emotional health, I might feel stuck and unsure, but I still have some glimpses of positive moments within the work place. And if I have high emotional health, it's like, I can't wait to get to the next project, the next experience. I can't wait to get to work because like I'm thriving though. Things are doing well. I'm not just surviving and I'm not just like maintaining something. It's how can I do better, right? We're able to adapt because everybody cares about each other. And we have moments where when somebody succeeds or when the team succeeds, we celebrate those things versus, oh, you did this much? Great. How much more can you do, right? Or people focusing on the bad things or the mess ups that we have. The third would be team support. And so the difference between company support and team support is a little bit more on the micro level. Team support could be within a department. If you have multiple locations, you might have really good team support at one location, but not great team support or company support at another location. And so it's really how do you feel about, can you gain new knowledge? Or do you feel supported by your peers through challenges? And can you openly discuss opinions, especially if they're going against or trying to improve things that are already going on, right? So here's what I'd like to share an example. I worked for a large gym. I was a personal trainer before I got into leadership coaching out in Colorado. There's probably 120 locations that this gym has. And I'm saying big, like we had 40 trainers on staff. Now, as far as company support went, I felt like I was just a cog in the machine, right? Like every month, how much can you produce? How much more can you produce is how I felt. The mental health part of it was okay, or the emotional health, because there were some times we had wins as a team that were huge, and there were some times where I had personal wins and it was big, but it always kind of went back to how much more can you do. But our team support was amazing. So our 40 trainers, every gym, every location had revenue goals and things like that. Well, 2 years in a row, our particular team won artistry, which meant we were the highest producing personal training team in the entire company, which once is pretty big honor. To do it 2 years in a row was huge. I had huge team support, even though I didn't have great company support. And when it talks about challenges, I have a video. I had back surgery my second year there. And when I came back, I had a goal to get back to squatting a certain amount. And when I finally got to that, about 4 to 6 months after my surgery, I have a video of it happening, and you don't see everybody, but of the 40 trainers, at least half of them were there, like encouraging me and cheering me on to reach this goal of mine. So even though it wasn't directly related to the job, although it kind of was since we're personal trainers, it was huge support. And we could talk about a lot of things that we maybe couldn't talk with management or other departments, because we had really good team support. But again, the company support, we kind of felt like, you got to be careful what is said. So there's different levels to each one of these things. Then we talk about work environment. Work environment is not necessarily the physical workplace itself, but it's the methodologies and the systems that are in place. So again, using my example, I had been in personal training before working at this particular gym. And so I had certain specific certifications that I brought to the table. One of them, I was the only one on the entire team that had it. And so in this particular gym, we had all these opportunities. There was nutrition, supplements. We could do group training. We could do corrective exercises. We could do, weight loss, sports performance, all these different opportunities. We did metabolics there. Every one of those things, we in-house had opportunities to grow and learn those things and add them to our repertoire. So for someone who is new, a first-time trainer, that would be very overwhelming. The whole idea of drinking from a fire hose, But because I came in with experience, I knew what things I brought to the team. I knew what things I wanted to focus on eventually, but I also knew I didn't have to learn everything at once. And so the work environment itself lended to me looking at, well, what do I want to do now? So when I first got into personal training, I was more of a sports performance kind of guy because I love sports growing up. But then after my back surgery and other issues I had, I really switched from sports performance / weight loss to these corrective exercises and helping people get out of pain and things like that. So the work environment, does the methodologies, the systems allow people to grow, to adapt, to level up, if you will, and add to what they're doing, or does it hamper that and kind of keep them in the same box that they started in? And finally, we talk about work stress. The simple way to think about work stress is, do I feel as an employee that I have enough time to get my work done on any given day? If I have low work stress, which is, a good thing, I have plenty of space for new things. It means the workload that I feel I have plenty of time in a day or a week to get that stuff done. If my work stress is medium, I might be doing good now, but if anything extra comes up, if anything emergency-wise comes up, I don't know that I can drop what I'm doing to jump to that, because then I would really be overwhelmed. And then high work stress would be the idea of the amount of work I have to do on any given day, I will never get 100% of it done. And so that leads to overwhelming feeling, that leads to anxiousness. And the people who have high work stress on a consistent basis, they're the ones that are at biggest risk for burnout. And so with that being said, those are the 5 aspects of environment when we talk about AQ. So you got company support. Do employees feel or perceive that the company cares about them as individuals, or are they just part of the machine? Emotional health, the degree to which people are thriving, are they experiencing more positive moments than negative ones? Team support, do they feel open to share knowledge? Do they feel supported through their challenges, both personally and professionally? And do they have the ability to openly discuss opinions? Work environment, does the organization itself help or hinder growth within the individuals? And then work stress, do you feel like you have more work than you have time to do it? Or do you feel like you have enough time to do your work and take something on if an emergency or something urgent comes up? As you think about those, right? Is your current environment, no matter what position you're in, is it supporting adaptability or hindering it? And which of the environmental dimensions stands out to you at this point?
All right, Elijah, we've got some good questions that have came in again. A lot to think about with what you're presenting on. Um, as a company who is looking for continued growth and success, what would you recommend to the business to balance, always striving to be better with producing high company support?
Yeah. So specifically asking about company support.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to chime in again, I think how I read it is, if you're a company who's always striving and are always like, you did great here, but you could do better, or let's make our
Hmm.
new goal this. How do you
Hmm.
balance your need to win with, you know, the
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when it comes to company support, it's really how does the mentality of the company, the leadership, the ownership, how does that translate to the individual, right? So if I think of team support, those are the people I work with on a daily basis. On a high level, company support is the company, do they create this environment or these questions of like, how are you doing as an individual, and how can we continue to grow and get more out of you? Or is it just how can you produce more, and I never ask about the individual, right? Um, here's a perfect example. There's a company I know locally that and this could be any number of values, okay? But this is what the company stands on. Their values are God, family, work, right? And a friend of mine um, had a situation with the family where it was kind of a big step for the family. So this friend was at work the day that this event was supposed to happen, right? And so one of the owners came up and was like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And this friend of mine was like, "What are you talking about? Like, I'm at work." And they're like, "Well, isn't today this, this, and this, right?" So the owner of the company is asking this person who was in management, like, "Why are you not putting family first?" Right? So in this particular case, the the standard was you take care of your family and your faith before you come to work. And this was a big enough situation where they were like, go home, go take care of this. It doesn't have to wait till after work. This is a huge event, right? That's company support where it's lived out and it says we care about you as a person and your family more so than we do you being productive right at this moment, because your productivity is there. So a lot of it has to do with your mission, right, and your values and living those things out. And so that whether it's ownership or leadership are putting those things in that kind of perspective. Because if people feel taken care of in that way, they will give more effort and try to find better ways to be effective and efficient in the job.
Awesome. They said thank you for the example. That was a really strong example. Another question came in, and they're curious if you, Elijah, has or how a coach would integrate this information with Gallup Clifton strengths. Have you ever done that?
I have done my particular strengths, and so strength and this, I mean, obviously they go kind of hand in hand. I'm the type of person I kind of look at how do things overlap versus, well, this thing's over here and this thing's over here. I think it really depends on what the strengths are, right, per person. And then we take a look at both the skill set and the character aspects of the adaptability. And we mold those together into, okay, now how do I coach this person? Not in general, but specifically through times of change. And I think that's where um, like so for me four of my top five strengths are in strategic planning, but if I'm constantly thinking big picture, right, which I tend to do, if something changes sometimes I have to go away from the strategic and get into the details or the tactic. So I think looking at what a person's strengths are just leads into or lends to a better ability to coach them through the changes that they're facing at any given moment.
Great. Thank you for answering that one. We have one more, but I'm going to hold it for next round because do you have one more?
Um, Yeah, kind of. We'll have time at the end here.
Okay.
Yep. So let's wrap this kind of up. So we talked about the 3 areas and the 15 subdimensions. So AQ ability, the skills, AQ character, more the innate traits of a person, and then the environment, which is a little more outside of our control. So what do we do with this, right? What's the action plan? What's next? Well, one of the things that we really try to focus on with this is, as I said, we lose a lot of work days globally because of anxiousness and depression. So how can we combat that? So 4 things really to focus on to really help your team lower the risk of burnout, have less absenteeism, have less sick days, things like that, is we're going to, if you're facing a time of change, or if you know a time of change is coming up, the first thing we really want to help our people with is resilience. How do you bounce back from setbacks or obstacles, right? We can coach them through that, help them be a little bit more optimistic or hopeful through that. But how do we help them find ways to move forward versus just settling in and be like, oh my God, this thing just needs to pass me by, right? So if we can increase our team's resilience, that's the first step, because those with higher resilience have much lower work stress in general. Then we have team support. So the higher the team support, the more I feel accepted and that I can be open about my opinions. I feel supported through challenges and can share things like that maybe go against the grain at work, the less stress I'm going to have as well. So these are 2 areas, both in the character and in the ability and in the character, that can really help us start to lower those stress and anxiety numbers when it comes to our team. And then the third one is our emotional response. So I know that I said it's kind of dependent on what the situation is and how more collected might be a little bit better off. But overall, those who are reactive in general, like they tend to jump to reaction versus being collected or more balanced. The more reactive they are, the higher the stress levels they feel specifically at work. So if we can focus on these 3 areas, that will, one, help us lower the anxiousness and the stress levels at work. But also, if we can help lower the work stress itself by helping our team prioritize so that they're more productive, maybe be more efficient, maybe be more effective at what they do, but helping them understand, like, you have time to do what you need to do because we're focusing on the priorities, not just focusing on the entire list of things to do. These 4 things can really lower those markers as far as stress, anxiety, burnout, and help keep people on the same page. So this is a simplification of one of the areas that we really focus on is helping people not burn out and be more aware of their own situation so that they can better perform for the team. And with that being said, I'll just kind of open it up. Do we have any questions?
No, this was great. Thank you so much, Elijah. Feel free to drop more questions in the chat. We did have one that said, what daily practices help improve a leader's adaptability?
I know this probably sounds kind of cliche or simple, but honestly, like putting yourself in situations where you have to adapt or change, because the change itself, the thought of the change and getting out of my routine is what is hard, right? And so when I was talking about courage earlier, it's not courage to do the change. Usually what the courage is taking that first action step that leads to the rest of the change. So I would say just finding ways to make little improvements that take you out of your routine, because when we stick to routine or the idea of this is how it's always been or how it's always worked, again, what's got us to this point might not be what we need to get us to the future.
Yeah, that's great. Got a couple thank yous. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Oh, what advice do you have when team support is there? However, a team member frequently jumps to a victim mentality. That's it.
That's a tough one, especially depending on the size of the team. And this might come across negative, but to be honest, if the team support is good and everyone else is like jumping to like, how can I help, or pushing through, or having a listening ear to different ideas or options or opportunities. Maybe, from a value standpoint, from an environment standpoint, from a culture standpoint, maybe it's time to part ways with a certain person. And I know that sounds negative, but to create the environment that we want, we have to be intentional about instilling it, because that's another area that we talk about a lot with our clients at Rising Tide is if you don't instill the culture, somebody else will with a strong personality or something like this. So how do we get through that? It's difficult because if that's what they constantly go to, but the rest of the team is willing to step up and go, more than likely it's not a value that is important to that particular person. I would say you could still try to coach them through it and help them be, again, more resilient, be more hopeful, things like that. But at the end of the day, if they are unwilling to change and adapt, that might be a hard decision or hard conversation to have.
Yeah, and they mentioned that their team is small, so 5 total. But to Elijah's point, I have definitely heard of companies who are very selective, bringing people on just because of, will the characters match? Do they, align with your mission or, the way you want your business to be perceived in the work environment? It's really important. Um, Thank you, Elijah, for addressing that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Elijah. Have a wonderful day. We hope to see everyone on here next week.